John, you are from a local church, and you've got some experience with school partnership. The partnership that your church has been a part of precedes your time there, and so you kind of stepped in and have been part of that. And then Jeremy at DreamCenter, you guys have been partnering with Delaware for how long? A long time. Yeah, and so whenever we talk about this idea of posture, this topic came up. It was really sparked whenever we got together, and John, you had said something about coming into schools with the posture of a guest. Can you just talk about what that means? Whenever you say posture of a guest, what's it mean to be in a school as a guest?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge when we're going anywhere, we're context, right? What is the context that we're going in? And is it the context that we live in? And I've been at Evansville for 2 years, but I have school partnership of about 13 with Glenwood Leadership Academy. And Crossroads does not reside in that neighborhood. So geographically, we're a guest, and we have to acknowledge that. Racially, we're a guest. Economically, we're a guest. And so these are all hurdles that can be overcome with trust and presence, but we have to understand that they exist, and if we run them over, there can be really bad consequences in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. Jeremy, what does that mean to you whenever you think of approaching school as a posture of a guest? What's that look like for DreamCenter?
Well, we have approached that with a perspective that we're there with permission, right? So we're not necessarily allowed to be there if we don't if we're not affecting things positively and making a positive presence. And so what I have told our staff and the people who come with me to Delaware is I always say, when you're there, you're me. You're carrying the banner of the DreamCenter, and they should expect everyone who comes with our banner to behave the way that I would, which is in a posture of a guest, respectfully, helping however we possibly can. You know, schools are a challenging environment, and there are a lot of kids and a lot of adults who have a passion for helping those kids and serving those kids. So any way we can come alongside the adults and say, how can we make you better? How can we uplift your leadership? How can we make things more comfortable here, make things more simple, or help contextualize big picture problems, which is something I think Nikki's going to talk about a little bit later. That is a value add that can go a long way towards that permission.
Yeah, that's really good. Could each of you just kind of speak to how, because you guys approach schools as a posture of a guest, but you're sort of a trusted guest now. You've been in the schools for a long period of time. You've built trust over time. Can you talk a little bit about what it looks like to build that trust and to be that consistent guest over time, and what does it look? How does that relationship change over time, and if you were to look at the relationship and how it's developed over time, what were maybe some of the phases, or how you've seen that grow from first-time guest coming in, and learning that context versus sort of becoming a regular part of that context, becoming part of the school community, part of the ecosystem? Because I know it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of intentionality. What does that look like?
Well, for us, having a really intimate relationship with the principal has been really important, and then also building strong relationships with other administrators and teachers. When someone with a DreamCenter shirt on comes walking through the door, we want people to have a certain expectation of what we're there to do and what we're not there to do. I think as you talked about phases, the principal of Delaware, her name's Julie Underwood, she's the best principal of the best school in Evansville, and she, sorry, your school's not as good. She came to us about 5 years ago and had a really excellent handoff meeting from the old principal to the new principal, and that was very important. That was sort of a first phase, and then it really started out as a sense of trying to prove ourselves to the school and prove that we had their best interests at heart and we wanted to make the school a better place to be, to the point now where I feel like we've got that really solid trust.
What did it take to to prove that? What things did you have to do?
Well, so we employ staff members who work at school, and they spend half their day at the school and then the other half of their day with us at the DreamCenter running our programs and after school. And that consistent presence, I think, has been really valuable. When school came back in 2020 after COVID, we doubled down our presence. So we literally took all of our staff and said, you're not doing anything anymore. You're going to be in the school, helping the school be a better place to be. I do lunch duty there every Monday. Anybody who wants to come do lunch duty with me, I always love bringing friends and guests.
I've done it, and it's great.
It's
so
fun.
Do it.
It's enlightening. I would say consistency is really important. Another thing that we say at the DreamCenter a lot when we're talking about building trust with people is the first time they ask, you've got to win. So if you've got someone you're trying to build a relationship with and they're reticent or they're kind of hesitant, the first time they ask you for something, you got to be right there and you got to win for them all the way. The last thing I'll say is principals are very, very busy. And I always say that principals and pastors are the two busiest people on the planet. And you've got to be adding value when you're communicating with principals. I often say that, and Julie would say this too, and we laugh about it sometimes. It's not very often that I get a call from Julie in the middle of a school day and it's like really great news. It usually is something that needs to be addressed and addressed right away. And you've got to be present, and you've got to be consistent, and you've got to consider all the factors that they're thinking about alongside what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think something that is embedded in that is frame one, listening. Just going in and saying, who are you? That's what the guest does, is listen. If the guest comes with solutions to a problem that they don't understand, then they're being counterproductive in that process. So listen longer than you think that you would ever have to listen, and then do some more. And for me, that's hard because I want to talk. And then,
would you say there's a component of like going at the pace of the? Because as I hear you talk, it sounds like it's easy to come in and want to do, but you're saying listening to understand, but also kind of gauging like what's the pace that they're setting for that relationship.
Absolutely, because trust is, that's the currency of any partnership, is trust. And even though I came into a partnership that had a 10+ year relationship, I didn't have that relationship. And so I needed to listen. I needed to prove who I was. We work closely with Potter's Wheel, and very much similar to DreamCenter in TP Park. And Chris is amazing and had built amazing relationships, but I didn't have those relationships. And so for integrity purposes, I didn't want to go in there and say, well, I know Chris, so therefore let's do this. So I went through a process of listening too. And then once you have enough trust for them to tell you the truth, then take action on that truth. I think one of the turning points in my personal relationship with Angie was when I disinvited 2 volunteers to an event because they were evangelistically pushy. And when I asked them to back that off, they said that they couldn't in good conscience do that. And I said, well, then I can't in good conscience allow you to be one of my volunteers, because that's going to violate our partnership with the school. And so I think that helped her know, I'm serious about this. We're going to do things in your way, at your time, and really take this seriously in a long-term relationship. And so to me, that's when those tough times come, we got to step up. And that wasn't a popular thing to do in our church. Probably
Yeah.
you understand that.
Yeah. Can you guys both talk a little bit more about Jeremy? You said like whenever folks from DreamCenter come in, they're representing DreamCenter, and that you want people to have a certain expectation when somebody's in there. Can you guys speak a little bit to how do you lead other people who are part of your organization or representing your organization? How do you lead them to have that trust within the school as well? And are there any like intentional things that you can do to help set that expectation so that when they show up, they're ready to fulfill the expectation that you're setting with the school?
Yeah, we have a core value at the DreamCenter called strategic relentlessness. We used to say whatever it takes, but we don't do whatever it takes because we won't break laws and stuff. But we do act on the idea of strategic relentlessness, which is that when we show up, we're there to do it. We're there to get the job done. We're there to do what we said we were going to do. That's a really important aspect of it, is that when you make a promise to us, so like, if a peacemaker's out sick one day, I contact Julie and say, who do we need to send over and when to cover whatever they were going to do, you know? We're not going to let them down because it can be such a frenetic, sort of stressful environment where if we're not meeting our expectations, things really fall apart. And so we try our hardest to fulfill every expectation we can. And then also, I would say, to add value. So one of the things that I love to do with Julie is I get to do it about once a year, is we walk around her school and she gives me what I call a fresh set of vision. So she points at things that she thinks are impossible, and we figure out ways to get it done. So through we got a grant from the Greater Evansville Relief Fund to renovate their courtyard. We've done some work across the street with their fencing because some of their fencing was out of whack. And these are things that school leaders look at and say, that's just a problem I'm stuck with. I can't do anything about it. And I bring people to the table and say, I've got people who can do things about this. Let's do something about it, right? And so that addition of value is really important. I think the last thing I would say is just a humble heart, and just to your point about what fits and what doesn't from an evangelical perspective. I know we're going to talk more about that a little bit later, but coming into that place with a heart of humility, I think is really important. And then I'm going to hand this to you when I'm done with this, so get ready for what you're going to say. Talk to kids. That's something I always tell anybody. Let's go find a kid and talk to them and learn more about them, because the kids that we get to serve, every single one of them is an absolute treasure. They're all hilarious, and they all have funny things to say that you wouldn't expect. And it can be very enlightening. That's something we always encourage our visitor friends to do.
Yeah, I love that.
We have all of our volunteers do some training in When Helping Hurts. So it is asset-based community development. How do you go into some place and first talk about strengths and assets versus deficits? And that is a big thing when you're going into a Title I school, is how do you see the beauty and the joy and accentuate that, get on board with that before we start talking about the hurdles. Because there is all of that stuff at the school, and we have tremendous principals and leaders there who I learn from all the time. So I think if we go into the school, one of the mantras I was taught in grad school is live life a learner. You know, if you go in and try to learn something every time you're there, you're probably going to be reflecting back what that school needs. And in the learning process, in that listening process, we found out that the kids at the school were doing really good. They were up and to the right, but the school was having a challenge with teacher retention. And so we shifted, not away from the kids, but to try to have an adopt a classroom model where our volunteers are being present and proximate in classrooms with teachers to support the teachers. And again, that doesn't mean we don't love on the kids, but that's what the school asked for, because the principal said her number one issue was that at Glenwood at that point, 70% of the teachers have been there 5 years or less, and we needed to move that needle. And so we're on the hook for that. So this isn't a partnership, like you said, that doesn't have, we're just generic and go love like Jesus, that's great, but what's it actually mean? What needles are we moving, and what are we willing to be accountable for? So in the next 3 years, we need to make that needle move, or we're not doing our partnership.
Yeah, that's good.
I just wanted to say one thing really quickly, which is the idea that a church would set aside what we would think of as sort of traditional church objectives and just take hold of what that principal wants to see happen, and then make that a part of your metric, right? That's really compelling and challenging, I think.
That's really good. So I want to open it up to the room for questions, so be thinking of any questions that you might have. But before we do that, I want to ask one more question about, you were just kind of talking about the focus sort of shifting from kids to, how can we partner with the teachers and the school administrators? Can you guys talk about that a little bit? Because I think oftentimes churches go into a school partnership and their heart and intention is, we want to serve the kids here. We want to serve the families here. And I've heard a lot of experienced partners say that they made that shift, and they recognize that for the long term, the best way to serve the students and families in that school were to support the people who were serving the students and families in that school all the time and had the expertise to do that. So can you just talk a little bit about how that fits in and what it's looked like to take that supportive role.
Yeah, there's a contextual reality about Crossroads is in Newburgh and Glenwood's on the lower south side. So oftentimes churches embrace schools in an attempt and a hope that they will come to the church. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But in our context, that probably shouldn't happen. Like, they need a neighborhood church that can grow them and fight for them and change the systems around them and that are really present. So that model wasn't ever going to work for us. And so that whole get them out to the suburbs thing, that's icky. So it was just a listening. Like, that wasn't possible in the normal scope of church school partnerships, at least for us. So it has shifted. We still do stuff with kids, don't get me wrong. And we do a ton of events, back to school drives, affordable Christmas, and different events. But every event is suggested by the school, initiated by the school. We support. We're constantly trying to get other partners to be involved in it too, because Glenwood's got an amazing ecosystem of partners from the YWCA, YMCA, Junior League, all kinds of different groups there. So we're always trying to involve them in that. But when our volunteers show up to those events, they hear about sponsoring a classroom. So it's kind of a funnel approach, I guess, to mobilization for our church people here.
I'm not going to go too long on this, but the educator of the year for the last 2 years has been from Delaware. So I'm just saying, I think that in a lot of ways, educators are missionaries. And what I mean when I say that is that they are on the front lines bringing our children what they most need. I had a pastor once who dinged me because we were doing a reading curriculum in our after-school program, and they said, "Don't you want to spend that time teaching the gospel instead of teaching about reading?" And I said, "Cool question. When you read the Bible last, did you read?" "Oh, cool. So they're going to need to read in order to read that Bible. That's good." I think the teachers that we get to work with are absolutely some of the most impassioned, courageous, daring leaders in our community. And anything at all that we can do to uplift them, I think, is energy well spent. Andy Stanley often says, the farther you are away from a problem, the simpler you think the solution is. And anytime I hear someone complaining about school, I say, "I'm so glad to hear you say that. Please come with me. I would love to have you at lunch at Delaware and show you what I see," because the school environment is one of the most important environments that we have as a community, and we need to, I feel strongly, and you're all here, so maybe you do too, that we need to do whatever we can to uplift that environment.
Can I go one more thing?
Yeah.
Churches, pastors, our responsibility as pastors and leaders spiritually is to help work with the Holy Spirit, Jesus, to form our people. There are things that can happen outside of the church that will never happen inside the church. Help our people to receive what God's doing in their life by being outside, by being present with people who don't look like them, talk like them, think like them, vote like them. Like, help them see the value in that they can gain and they can grow as a result of that. That will totally change the narrative from taking off your Superman cape and going as a grower and a co-learner with everybody around us. It totally changes the narrative if we can get to that.
Yeah, I think what I hear you saying is that whenever we go into schools with a humble posture and we serve, actually the discipleship that's happening is in us. The formation that's happening is in us because we are taking that posture of Jesus, and it's in that posture that we're able to grow. And so there's sort of this additional benefit of churches going in and listening and doing these service things because that's helping you make disciples of the people in your church.
And it looks like for us, my constant question to volunteers is, I don't want to hear what you did, I want to hear how you grew.
Right.
First.
That's good. Well, I want to open it up for just like one or two questions as we're talking about this topic. Go ahead.
I'm curious, looking at the fact that this is all great, by the way, so this is not like a slam. I'm genuinely curious. There's a lot of elementary school, middle school partnerships. What, if any, partnerships do we have with high schools? Because my ministry is specifically high schools.
I can say on behalf of John here that Potter's Wheel will be I'm dictating policy for Pottersville here, but if I know them well, they will be engaging with Bossy in the future, and DreamCenter has begun engaging North Junior and North High School. We have had a staff member at North Junior for the last year, and we'll have a staff member at both North Junior and North High School starting this fall. And I want to tell you, one of the things that's so beautiful about this is, and I'm going to give Austin time for his question. One of the things that's so beautiful about this is that once you get the trust, the gates really open up. Like the principals of North Junior and North High School have seen what we've done at Delaware, and they're like, whatever you want, come, whatever you need. To the point that the principal of North High School told us earlier this month that he'll give us a room in the high school to do whatever we want. And like that's, once you get past that initial round of trust building, it really flows very easily and naturally. Do you want to add anything about high school?
JC and I were just talking about that right before we walked up here, about the transition from the middle school to high school for Bossy. So I didn't know that. That's great. I'm glad Pottersville's doing that. But it's an issue, yeah.
Austin.
Well, yeah, so my question actually works well with that. So I know, especially at the DreamCenter, but also at Pottersville and Crossroads Partnership, the end goal is actually not the church or the school partnership, right? So could you explain a little bit the promise and how that interfaces with church-school partnership and how those two might better connect?
Yeah. So the 100 kids that we serve at the DreamCenter are promised, and what we say what we mean when we say that is that the DreamCenter, the student, and the parent have all signed a contract that parent will be the leader of their child's educational team, that the child will do what is needed of him and be the scholar that we expect them to be, and that we will take responsibility for their success. So we have said, no exceptions, no excuses. Every single kid we work with will be career, college, and life-ready followers of Jesus by the time they graduate high school. And we've got about 100. Pottersville has about 60. And then I think Audubon Kids Zone has another 60 or so that are what we call promised. And we're going to do whatever we have to do to make sure that those kids are successful because we love them, because we see them as loved children of God wherever they are in their spiritual path. And we just can't accept the negative consequences that our cradle-to-adult continuum in Evansville creates, things like poverty and incarceration. When you love a kid, that just ain't happening. Austin, I know you have kids, and I know that you are not going to let that happen for your kids. I'm going to do everything in my power for my kids to make sure that doesn't happen, and every parent in this room would probably say the same. And we're just coming alongside those parents and saying, we're making you this promise that your kids are going to make it.
From the church side, we see our partnership with Glenwood and Pottersville as a triangle. And so we try to support all legs of that triangle. So for us, there have been times where we've had a call in the B team support for family, where they've needed crisis support or different things, probably a half dozen families. That's pragmatically what that has looked like for us, because again, we're guests to that, to the promise zone, to the things. So we try to support those things whenever we can to the goals. But the end goal, as I know Community One, is totally sold out to, is the flourishing of our community, right? This is when we pour into kids and teachers and schools, the whole community rises.
One more thing real
Yep,
quick.
go ahead.
I'm going to change your triangle to a square because, to your point earlier, the local church that is local to Glenwood, ultimately, in the most beautiful form of this, would be a big part of that relationship as well.
So we had biology class, now we have geometry class. So you guys are really getting into the school spirit today. It's great. Well, thank you guys. These two are sticking around, so if you have more questions, they're going to be here discussing, and they're here in Evansville and not hard to get a hold of too. So give them a hand. Thank them for just sharing from their partnership.